Herbalism has gone soft. Natural healing modalities are nowhere near as potently practiced as they once used to be. And I want to talk to you about it today. My name's Lila. I'm a clinical herbalist, founder of the Virtual Natural Healing Clinic, and podcast host of Lila's Herbal Revolution. And I have been recently approached by multiple people asking for mentorship. They hear the things I talk about in my content or on my podcast, things like loading doses and other concepts they haven't heard elsewhere, and they want mentorship. They haven't found where they fit into the space yet, and they don't necessarily resonate with the herbal schools they're going to or the leading voices in herbalism on the internet. Because there's a lot of people who are talking about herbalism on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram with big followings that aren't necessarily potent or clinical or effective herbalists. And this space has, in my opinion, gotten kind of confused and diluted in some ways. So the first challenge the space faces is that there's no true definition of what an herbalist is. An herbalist can be anyone from the person growing herbs, the person foraging and wildcrafting herbs, the person medicine making, the person making skincare products using botanicals, or somebody like me who practices clinically. I specialize and work with chronic and complex conditions. So I'm not treating a bunch of colds and flus and tummy aches. People come to me with autoimmune diseases, chronic asthma, allergies, digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, when they just feel off, people that have been let down by their doctors and the medical system, people who need help and they know natural healing works, but they're not able to do it themselves. So that term herbalist is confused, and you don't know when you're following an herbalist what herbalism they're necessarily into. And it kind of weaves into the second piece of what's causing and diluting herbalism in the space. So herbalism has had a complete dark ages in America. It was completely wiped off the map, aside from some people practicing underground. And what this means is we've lost all our cultural and traditional beliefs and mindset and practices around herbs. So in a lot of, I'm going to say in most cultures, herbal medicine plays a part of the healing process. And in certain cultures, that's a larger part than others, and we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. But in traditional cultures where herbal medicine was the epicenter of health, it was practiced in a hierarchy. So you'd have someone in the home, maybe it was mom, who knew how to use 10 kitchen herbs for tummy aches and boo-boos. You know, she's reaching for the rosemary, she's reaching for the basil or the thyme or the cumin, like these mild herbs that you cook with, that are flavoring agents, that are easily accessible. You know, maybe it's the weeds that are growing around. That person had a limited Materia Medica, limited skill set, probably passed down from their mom, and could use herbs and natural remedies to handle a good portion of just daily scrapes and tummy aches. And then if somebody in the family had something more serious, they would go to grandma or like a matriarch or another figure in the family who knew a few more herbs, who could use them in a more sophisticated way, and they would handle like the next layer of issues. And then at the very top of the hierarchy, you would have the community herbalist or the clinical herbalist or the medicine man or woman who you would go to for the chronic, the complex, the big stuff. And this person was the specialist. This person was the person that probably had a really big Materia Medica and knows how to use these things in a really sophisticated manner. Now, we still have all three levels of herbalism happening out there in the herbal space, but there's no delineation. There's no delineation between who's working on the complex, the chronic, the hard stuff, who's working on and teaching the mild, home-driven, based remedies, or that piece that sits in the middle, like this grandma herbalism, which I kind of feel like is akin to some of the more like folk methods or wise woman herbalism. And so there's all these like layers and hierarchies to the way that herbalism is practiced, the way that plant power is harnessed and used for our health, but we aren't necessarily talking about that hierarchy and the different roles that people play. So the type of herbalism that is widespread, that you are seeing on your social media, that I think is kind of at the forefront. And even when you look at the books that are being put out on herbalism and things like that, to me, it's a softer form of herbalism that's more for those first two tiers, the grandma herbalism, the home herbalism. It's not necessarily that herbalism for these chronic and complex conditions. And trust me, in today's population, we are seeing really challenging things happening. Like people's health is just, it's complicated. We're seeing patterns that traditional texts told us we would never see. And it takes skill to work with these types of issues. But the books and the people talking about herbalism don't make this distinction, and they're putting forth narratives that these really complex and chronic things can be solved with this herb. You know, for an example, if somebody has PCOS and somebody just says, go take chasteberry, it balances hormones, that is not going to cut it. We are leaving all kinds of space on the table to actually help this person because we are giving soft recommendations or recommendations that aren't going to serve this population. And I'm a big proponent of when herbalism is ineffective for somebody, they either have to go back to the medical model that's already failing them or they don't find help. So I feel really passionate about helping herbalism forward in the way of, let's make it potent again. Let's make sure that it's clinically effective. Let's make sure people are getting results with natural healing because there's so much it can do. And there's so many people that need to be helped by this style of natural healing. But in order for this style of natural healing to be effective, it has to be practiced effectively. This is using the proper herbs and the proper doses with the proper preparations. This is understanding patterns and entry points for people and how to work with complex and competing conditions. This is going beyond, oh, you have, XYZ symptom, take XYZ herb. And a lot of herbalism has gotten sucked into the same medical model and practices and philosophies and mindsets that modern medicine has, and it is underserving people. Now, I know herbalism is the people's medicine. I know that it is appealing because it's accessible. It's not locked up behind, a pharmacist and a doctor and a prescription. But at the same time, just because it's accessible doesn't mean you don't have to have skills and knowledge to apply these things effectively. And I find that there is a world of difference, miles of difference between what you're learning and reading in books and what happens in practice with a live human being. And the way that people are promoting and talking about herbalism and what it can do is either understating what herbs can do or overstating what herbs can do. And we don't have a clean picture in the narrative right now of what effective herbalism actually looks like. So I'm going to give you an example. There was a guy, and he's in the alternative health scene, and he has a big following on LinkedIn. And I read a post from him the other day that said, I wanted to see if I could lower my cholesterol naturally using natural remedies. So he took dismal doses of niacin, of red rice yeast, and of garlic. And if you go to natural healing blogs or you go follow like herbalism on social media, like these are absolutely things that you're going to pick up on as if you want to lower your cholesterol, do these things. The guy saw 0 budges in his cholesterol and said he needed to go take a statin. Natural healing's great, but we got to bring in the big guns for the big things. Now, I will tell you firsthand from my own clinical experience and from my mentors and all of the knowledge I have, lowering blood fats is very susceptible to herbal medicine. You can very effectively lower somebody's cholesterol with herbal remedies. But would I pick those? No, those are like C-list picks. Would I pick those doses? No, his doses were extremely low. So he didn't have the knowledge. He picked up the information somewhere off the internet, and then he turned to natural healing, said it didn't work, turned back to the statin, which yes, will lower your cholesterol, but it will come at a price. And he sent this narrative out to thousands of millions of people. And this is the problem, is the regurgitation of soft, poor information. And no delineation between what actually works and what we're just regurgitating and saying works. So information is picked up by bloggers and media outlets and social media influencers, and it's regurgitated and it's regurgitated and it's regurgitated. And because it is everywhere, if you go Google something, it looks like we have consensus or truth, when in reality we have people that are just regurgitating things without wisdom or clinical backing. So there is, again, a mile of difference between what we think works in the natural healing space and what actually is clinically effective, meaning it works when you're one-on-one in a live setting with a live human and you are looking to move the needle. And I see this in not just herbalism, but in Ayurveda and even in traditional Chinese medicine. And I understand why it's happening. The spaces haven't been properly carved out for natural and in naturopathy. Don't let me forget that. And I understand because the paths have not been adequately carved out. We have not defined who does what, who works with what. And it's become this diluted, confused kind of melting pot of a space. I'm a huge advocate for natural healing. I don't see doctors. This is the work I do. This is my passion. This is my hobby. I fully believe in the power of herbs, which sounds cheesy, but I do. And it has to be used in an effective way, though. You are not going to Sprouts and picking up some bottles off the shelf and calling it herbalism. It goes so far beyond that. And there's almost this level of, I want to say this gently, but egoism involved with people who aren't trained to think that they can work on really complex and hard things from what they read in an herb book. It spans beyond that. And it's almost like this shattering moment when you enter the herbal space and you read these books and you're like, oh my God, this is so magical. Look at all the potential that herbs have. And that potential is true, but the way it's presented isn't. And so we have to bridge this gap because that's what there is. There's a gap that needs to be bridged in the space to understand how things actually work in practice and what is clinically effective. So as people started coming to me and asking for mentorship, at first I was like, nah, I don't know if that's my path. But as I really sat with it, I decided to step up and do what I can to bridge that gap. This is where my interests lie. I love talking about tincture math. I love talking about the practicalities of making herbalism work, from everything from sourcing, because that's a whole other piece of the puzzle, a whole other piece of the pie that doesn't even get discussed. Can you actually access the herbs? Can you get them timely? Can you get them in the right preparation? There's so many times where I have to go rewrite a formula because what I want is an accessible and a timely manner for my clients. So from sourcing to dosing, the actual dosing you need to make herbs effective, and then the practicalities of getting somebody to take those doses, and the practicalities of herbal medicine doesn't taste good. We have to really get people to undertake this task of getting their herbs in. And then there's the other picture of, are we looking at lab work? Are we getting in extra nutrients? How did we get here? What lifestyle and nutrition changes are we making? There are so many pieces that have to come together to make this effective and sustainable for people. And it's overwhelming. It can be very overwhelming to make it all make sense. And that's what I hear from people who are studying and looking for more. They learn herbs, they get monographs, they have this Materia Medica, but they don't understand how to make that leap to make it effective in clinical practice, or to even write the protocols or put together the formulas, because there's, like I said, just so many pieces that have to come together. So this month, I launched the Path to Practitioner Potency Mentorship Group. It's a school community that I put together where I will be doing live monthly trainings, Materia Medica drops, live case reviews and Q&As with the students. There's a message board that you can join and ask questions to at any point to have community and support where you're stuck. And you get access to other upgrades and bonuses and goodies. And it's a really good toolbox that will be built out to make natural healing potent again. to make it effective, to bridge all these gaps, to help people understand what tools are effective, what tools aren't, and how to think like an effective clinician. This is community, mentorship, confidence building, toolbox building, and I think it's a great fit for herbalists, naturopaths, functional medicine doctors, integrative health professionals, holistic healers, and even like functional nutritionists and people that have learned some herbs and want to take that to the next level. This isn't a full certification program. It's not another big investment. It's not another, we're going to spend 2 years to go through this. What this is an adjunct space for you to develop your potent clinical skills, to make these things work. And that doesn't mean you have to be in one-on-one clinical practice to join. If you're a serious student, if you really put some study behind this and you just want to see these things work effectively, this is a space for you. We still have a few founding member seats left. They are locked in for life at a very nice discount to help build up the community early. And then as the toolbox in the community builds, that price will go up. So if you are interested in joining, I wouldn't wait, because you will get locked into that discount for life. I am Lila, and I will see you guys next time.